Al Thompson introducing me to that place. And we had a good time. Emmanuel George was there as well, and we enjoyed that. And then to have a good meal tonight with the Pagets, Mike and Robin, and the visit was also tremendous. Really do appreciate the good way you're taking care of me. When I got here, this jacket, last week this jacket buttoned better than it does right now. I'm having trouble getting it buttoned tonight, thank you very much. So we'll just have to go unbuttoned tonight. And I do appreciate your hospitality more than you can possibly imagine. Now, during the first 10 minutes of this message, and these are statistics that are on the average, and they don't represent necessarily the same exact percentages in each part of our country, but on the whole, on the average, during the next 10 minutes, the following things will happen or be decided upon in America by many of our young people. 10 kids across this country in the next 10 minutes will attempt to commit suicide. There are 105 who will make the decision to quit school. There are 618 high school seniors on the average who will smoke marijuana within the next 10 minutes. 20 girls between ages 15 and 19 will become pregnant. 5 of those girls will give birth to their babies as unwed mothers, and 8 of those girls will make the decision to have an abortion rather than have the child. Now, we have some teachers in the building tonight. My wife is a school teacher, and so I know that those who've ever been involved in public education can certainly appreciate very much the contrast between these two things. In the 1940s, school teachers were asked to list the top 7 problems that interrupted their educational environment in the 1940s, and these are the items that they listed: talking in class, chewing gum, making noise, running in the halls, cutting in line, dress code violations, and littering. I'm not suggesting that those aren't problems for the educational environment and that they pose no problem at all, but I'm asking you to contrast the problems that were faced on the whole in the 1940s with the teachers who were asking in the 1990s, what are the top 7 problems you face in the school system? They said drug abuse. Then they put alcohol abuse, but alcohol is a drug, so really it belongs in category 1. Pregnancy, suicide, rape, robbery, and assault. We've come a long way, baby, but it's not in the right direction. And you see the issue that we're facing. There are all kinds of problems. And I'd like to tell you that the drugs that are depicted on the screen here are drugs that no Christian young person would ever come within 10 feet of, and that no one would ever offer them these types of drugs, and that they would never participate if they were offered these types of drugs. But I've been directing a Christian camp in Knoxville, Tennessee since 1985. I've been working there at that camp almost 30 years now. And I can tell you that every single one of these things on the screen, with the exception of perhaps one, I've had young people come to me and confess to having used or being asked to use. And you think about all of the ways that our young people are being bombarded today with the drugs that are available, and 1 out of every 3 teenagers using an illicit drug within the past 30 days. And you think about approximately 6.2 million young people between age 12 and 17 at some point in time in their lifetime have smoked marijuana. 2.7 million have used it in the last month, 4.8 in the last year, and 1 out of every 20 high school seniors smokes it every day. And then you think about alcohol. And alcohol is certainly an issue as well. About 1 out of every 20 seniors drinks alcohol daily. And approximately 92% of all high school seniors have at least used alcohol at least one time during their lifetime. 66% have used it in the last month, 86% in the last year. And then there are those sins of sensuality that tempt us and tempt the young people. 1.1 million teens becoming pregnant each year. That's 11% of all teens between ages 15 and 19. And there is the fact that 40% of today's 14-year-old girls will be pregnant at least once before they're 20 years old. Now, 70% of unwed teenage mothers will go on welfare, and a number of them will consider abortion. I want you to consider that in 1981, teenagers between 15 and 19 had 433,330 abortions. That represented 43.3 abortions per 1,000 pregnancies. That was over 25% of the abortions that were performed in the United States in that given year of 1981. I want you to look at the picture on this side of the screen, and I want you to reflect upon what you're seeing. The biggest lie that Satan is trying to peddle about abortion is that, look, until very, very close to delivery time, it's not even really human. It doesn't look human in its characteristics. It doesn't have the characteristics of being like a baby, a newborn baby. My friends, I want to ask you a question. Do you realize that 18 days in, the child's heart begins to beat? So every abortion does stop a beating heart as far as those children are concerned that have not been aborted by some overnight drug. I want you to stop and think about this. This is a picture of a 16-week-old baby in the womb. This is not a picture of a 16-week-old baby out of the womb. This is an intrauterine photograph of a 16-year-old baby inside the womb. Now please consider that in the state of Indiana, when my sister was a teenage girl, we had heard that she could not get her ears pierced without parental permission. And so we checked it out. We sent her in when she was 16 years old to a place to get her ears pierced, and they told her promptly, young lady, unless you have your mama here with you, or your dad, or some supervising guardian, we can't pierce your ears. Do you know that my sister could have gone in that very same year, that very same age that she was, she could have gone and she could have received an abortion, and my parents would never have had to know about it. You have to have parental permission to get your ears pierced, but to stop a human life from being born, you don't. At least not at that time did you in that state. And almost half of all teen pregnancies end in abortion, and so many of the mothers are left scarred because of the emotional pain and anguish that they have later on. I'm so grateful, by the way, for the forgiveness that comes through knowing Christ, and the fact that people who've made bad decisions can be forgiven for them. And so if there's anyone watching this later on or hearing me tonight that is needing that kind of forgiveness, I'm here to tell you with great happiness that God will forgive even decisions that have been made in the past that were not good decisions. The suicide rate among teenage mothers, 10 times higher than that of the general population, and only 1 out of every 10 teenagers that gets married only because they're pregnant and having a child. Only 1 out of every 10 of those marriages stay married. Now, those couples usually end up splitting up if the only reason they got married in the first place is the child. 9 out of 10 of them get a divorce. Now, the question I'd like to focus on tonight is the more positive aspect. I could cite statistics all night, and we could all be depressed. I'd rather stop and say, okay, now what can we do to protect our children from these things? What can we do? The first thing I'd like to notice with you that we can do is educate. Every parent in this room thinks it's important for their child to get a good education. But I want to make this point. It's not just important for your child to get a good secular education, to learn reading, writing, and arithmetic, as it used to be called. It's so important for our children to be educated in that which matters most. And notice in Deuteronomy chapter 6 and verse 6, here are the words of Holy Scripture given to parents back then. These words which I command thee this day, notice first have to be in the parent's heart, shall be in thine heart. Now once the parent gets it into their heart, what's next? and thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children. And he says, you shall talk of them as you engage in this activity. You should teach them diligently to your children. Talk of them when you're just sitting in the house, when you're just taking a walk by the way, when you're lying down at night, when you're getting up in the morning. My daughter would tell you that when she was growing up, and the boys would chime in and say this was true too. We'd be driving somewhere on vacation, and I'd see something that would remind me of some biblical principle, and I would say, hey kids, let me tell you about this. And they'd say, oh, here comes another teachable moment with Dad. You're looking for those opportunities to try to pass on those truths to your children. In fact, you want to bind them for a sign upon your hand and have them as frontlets between your eyes. We have people tie strings around their fingers so they won't forget something. The Bible says here, you bind it upon your hand and don't ever let go of this truth. Write it on your hand if you have to. Don't forget it. Write it on the doorpost of your house, the original post-it note. Back in Deuteronomy chapter 6, he says, put it on your gates. Now notice, you say, okay, that's an isolated time. In the same book in which we just read, Deuteronomy 6, this is Deuteronomy 11, Deuteronomy chapter 11. What does he say in Deuteronomy 11? He says in this passage of Scripture that you should teach them your children, speaking of them when you sit in your house. He says, I want you to also speak of them when you're just walking by the way, when you lie down, when you rise up. Write them on the doorpost of your house and upon your gates. Why should you do that? That your days may be multiplied, and the days of your children in the land which the Lord swore to your fathers to give them as the days of heaven upon the earth. So says Deuteronomy 11, 19 to 21. How important is this education? Watch this. Which we have, right, even I can't reach the top of that. Which we have heard and known. And how did you hear it and know it? Watch this. Our fathers have told us. What did you learn from your father? Some of us have been privileged to have good Christian fathers. What did you learn from your father? What are your children learning from you, Dad? What are they learning from me as a father? The Bible says we heard it, we knew it. Why? Because our fathers told us. Now what's our job? Now that we've learned it, we will not hide them from their children, showing the generation to come the praises of the Lord and His strength and His wonderful works that He has done. He established a testimony in Jacob. He appointed a law in Israel, which He commanded our fathers, Deuteronomy 6, that they should make them known to their children. Why? That the generation to come might know them, even the children which haven't even been born yet. Do any of you have family heirlooms that have been passed on down from one generation to the next, to the next, to the next, and it's your job to pass it on down to the next one? My friends, is there any greater or more precious family heirloom than a knowledge of the Holy Scriptures? This is what we need to be passing down to our children, hoping that they will grow up and pass it down to their children, and so on and so forth. That's what God expects for us to do. Now, part of the learning process is discipline. Have you ever thought about that word discipline? Cut the very ending of the word discipline off, and what do you have? Disciple. That's what discipline is designed to do, to educate. It is designed to modify behavior, to educate a child about what is and what is not acceptable behavior. And this is a picture of our youngest child when he was much younger than he is now. He knows this is in this presentation, by the way. I'm not doing this behind his back. But if you look at his backside, I don't know if you can see it very well, but you see the stains on the backside of his breeches. Mama had told him that he had better quit going out in his church pants after services and sliding down that hill with the other boys in the congregation. And that she bought already one too many pair of pants that had been ruined by him doing that. And that she was going to have to apply the Board of Education for the seat of knowledge if he did it again. All right. He was clear about what the consequences would be. Now you notice Mama's hugging him here. And she's hugging him because she's just given him a measured dose of discipline to try to say, I really meant what I said. He didn't listen. He didn't hear the instructions. He went right out and slid down that hill in his pants, ruined them. They weren't going to be able to be washed and fixed, and so Mama had finally had it. Now, some people take this whole subject right here and they act like it's something that's abusive. I am not standing here tonight advocating child abuse, but I'm standing here tonight telling you that what our children still need is a firm hand of discipline to tell them, I'm in charge, you're not. You know what the Duke of Wellington said when he came back from visiting America? Someone asked him, they said, hey, what was the thing that impressed you the most about your visit to America? This is what he said. I guess the thing that sticks with me the most about my visit to America is how well the parents obey their children over there. And in some houses, that's not the case. In some houses, it's quite clear as to the fact that mom and dad are in charge, and the children soon find that out. But my friends, in some homes, the children are running the place. They are in charge, and they know they are in charge, and they are used to being in charge, so when they go to school in the classroom, they think they're going to be in charge there. When the officer tells them don't do that, they think, why do I have to listen to you and your authority? I've never had to listen to authority anywhere else. I've always been in charge. I'm the authority. And this is the problem that we have. Now look at Proverbs 13 and verse 24, and notice what you read here. The Bible says here, he that spareth his rod hateth his son, but he that loveth him chasteneth him. The King James word at times here means early on. It's done early. A man came into a sculptor's workshop and he saw two sculptures of a face. One of them was so clearly defined, the features were so clearly distinct, you could tell exactly where the nose was supposed to be, the eye sockets, you could see the mouth, everything. The one right next to it was obviously from the same mold, but it didn't have nearly as sharp of features as this other sculpture did. And so the man asked the sculptor, why the difference? He said, quite frankly, I waited until the impression had cooled too much before I tried to make the impression. I waited too long to try to make the impression. It had cooled too much before I tried to stamp it. Our children in their youth, that's when they need primarily to learn first and foremost about the authority. Now, some people say if you love your child, you'll never spank them. My Bible says, he that spareth his rod hateth his son, but he that loveth him chasteneth him early on. He takes time out to educate and to give the child something to learn. Look at Proverbs 19:18. In Proverbs chapter 19 and verse 18, the Bible says this, chasten thy son, watch this, while there is hope. And the implication is quite clear. We can wait until it's too late to really make a strong impression, and we can wait until the cooling process has gone too far. We need to strike while the iron is hot, so to speak. And we need to get that message across. And we need to make it very clear. Look at Proverbs chapter 22 and verse 15. In Proverbs 22:15, foolishness is bound in the heart of a child. Whose child? Surely that doesn't mean your child, does it? That means my child, your child, children in general. Foolishness is bound in the heart of a child, but, watch this, you can get rid of that foolishness. How? One way is the rod of correction. Now, again, I'm talking measured dose, so don't misunderstand me. I'm not talking about coming in and having a bad day and taking it out on your children. I'm not talking about flailing wildly and doing all kinds of things just to get your temper vented. No, I'm not talking about, let me ask you a question. How many moms in here who are willing by show of hands would admit to have taken their children to get a vaccination? How many moms in here have ever taken their children to get a vaccination? Moms, I want to ask you something. Did you know before you went that your child would cry? You did. And you took them anyway. How barbaric can you ladies be? You are so mean and cruel. No, you're not. What would you say if I charged you with, how could you do that when you knew it would make them cry? If you really loved them, you wouldn't make them cry. What would you say back to me? You'd say, I love them enough to let that hurt for just a little bit so they wouldn't get something that would hurt them even more, the disease itself. And you're exactly right. But let me ask you a question. When a child gets a vaccination, does the doctor come in and just start wildly aiming and just jabbing over and over and over and over again wherever he wants to? No, it's a very measured and aimed dose. And my friends, you and I can dispense a proper dose of discipline, a measured dose of discipline, and oh, how much we need to, because there's some folks in this world who just don't see what I'm talking about. Look at Proverbs 23, verses 13 and 14. Here the passage says, withhold not correction from the child. If you beat him with a rod, he shall not die. Beat him with a rod, and you'll deliver his soul from hell. This is what I was talking about earlier. You give him that measured dose on his backside, and it causes him to realize that I need to respect the rules, I need to respect authority, and I need to grow up and do what I'm told. Because if we don't train them to do what someone in authority tells them to do, then when they hear the preacher say, God said you have to do such and such, their attitude is going to be, so what? I don't have to do that. I want to give you an illustration that I'll never get out of my mind. One church I preached for a long time ago. There was a young couple that had a boy. He was 4 years old. Remember that, that's significant in a moment. 4 years old. He got him a brand new pair of cowboy boots, and they had a very sharp tip on the end of them, a very pointed tip on the end of those cowboy boots. And he thought it was hilarious one Wednesday night after services to go around kicking people in the shins with his brand new cowboy boots and then running away, laughing gleefully about what he'd just done. He kicked one of our elderly sisters in her shin, and she was one of these ladies whose skin had grown so paper thin, if she bumped into a door jamb, she'd bleed. If she just barely bumped into it, imagine what it did to her legs when he kicked her as hard as he could, and she just started bleeding profusely. I watched him do it. And I thought, you know, if my child had done that, I would want someone to inform me that my child had done that. Why? So I could take care of business and make sure my child would not do that again. At least without knowing there's a severe consequence for you doing that. You don't walk up to elderly people and kick them in the shins and think it's funny. Especially when you look at the pain, you feel the blood. You can't do that. Even if they don't bleed, it's wrong and you don't do it. So I thought if I was a father and my child did it, I would want to be told. And so I took the boy to his father, told the father what I just witnessed, told him about Sister So-and-so being in pain on the front bench of the auditorium. And he picked up his 4-year-old boy and walked down to where she sat. And he said, now you apologize to her for kicking her. His boy looked at him and said, no. He said, now, you apologize for kicking her. You're not supposed to kick people. You apologize. The boy took his hand, opened it up, and slapped his father across the face as hard as he was capable of. And, I mean, it left a huge red handprint on his father's face. We're all standing there in shock. His father reached up and kind of rubbed it a little bit. He said, now, we've talked about that. I don't like it when you do that. You know I don't like it when you do that. He said, now you apologize to her. He said, no. He cocked his head. He spit in his father's face. His father reached up to wipe the drool off of his face. Some of us were beginning to discuss the possibility of emergency adoption proceedings at this point. This child is out of control. And someone needs to educate this child. I was, for some reason, selected by the elders to go by myself to visit this family to have this talk with them. I really wish they'd gone with me, but they sent me. So I sat in their living room, and the mother came walking up to me, and she handed me a book. and says, you need to read this book right here to understand what's going on with our child. It was Dr. Benjamin Spock's book, and she had earmarked the chapter that I really needed to read, the chapter on the terrible twos. Do you remember how old I told you your child was? 4. Why a chapter on the terrible twos had application to someone that was twice that old, she did not explain. But I took that book in this hand that she handed me, and I had my Bible with me, and I took it in this hand, and I held them both up, and I said to her, I said, look, who knows more about child rearing? Almighty God, who made human beings and knows what makes them tick and knows whether certain discipline will or won't work, or a psychologist or a doctor, a medical doctor, who, by the way, I said, I don't know if you're aware of it, Dr. Benjamin Spock has recanted his earlier writings, has regarded them now as being too permissive. He now realizes he advocated a too permissive attitude among parents, and there are a generation of children who are raised with that erroneous philosophy, and here's God's wisdom, and some people won't even listen to it because they've been misled to think that that's the same as child abuse. Look, a measured dose of discipline on a child's backside is going to keep them from greater pain later on in this life and in the life to come. Now, am I suggesting to you that it's always a spanking? No, because I've got 3 children, and those of you in here who've had more than one child will attest to what I'm about to say. With some children, you just give them a stern look, buddy, they snap out of it and they're right back where they need to be. Just a stern look will get it done with some. There are others, a stern look is only the preamble. They are determined, and they are not going to be told what to do and what not to do. Like a little boy that was told to be sitting in the corner, and he was told, are you sitting in the corner? He said, yeah, but I'm standing on the inside. And that's the mentality that we're trying to get out of these children, this rebellion that says, I'm in charge around here. And I want you to notice a passage that deals with this very thing. Look at Proverbs 29, 15 to 17. Proverbs chapter 29, verses 15 through 17. Notice the rod, but not the rod only. Some parents have this mistaken idea that if I just spank my child, that'll give them the wisdom. No, it's the rod and something. The rod and reproof give wisdom. What is going on here, and you can't see it very well, is that my wife Tish is hugging Michael after his spanking to reaffirm her love for him. She's not just giving him a kiss there on the cheek, she's whispering something into his ear. She's reminding him of why this just happened. In fact, our policy is certainly one that we would never claim to be perfect parents by a long stretch, I'll tell you that. But our policy was just not only do this, but then say, okay, why did this happen? And you know what I found out? My children listened a lot better than I thought they did about why we were doing this. Our oldest son had gotten in trouble somewhere out of town, and he'd done something that he'd been told time and again not to do. But he did it anyway, and so I told him the next time he'd done it that would be the consequence. So we drive 6 or 8 hours home, long drive, long day. I get home. I just remember as we're walking in the house what I told him would happen when we got home. I told him to go into the bedroom and gave him a couple of half-hearted swats, not much at all, and got ready to hug him, and then he looked at me, and this is what he said. Are you trying to tell me that my behavior is acceptable? I said, what? You've always told us that you wanted to make the spanking hurt just enough to make us not want to do again what we did. That didn't hurt at all. What's my motivation? I couldn't believe my ears. And everyone that hears this story tells my son, what were you thinking, man? Just hush. I said, bend over. And I gave It told me, though, that he realized there was a connection between the discipline and the education. It's not, I'm mad, I've had a hard day, let me take it out on my children. It was, I want you to learn a better way of behaving. And if this is the method we have to resort to, then fine. Now, some children don't have to have that method, but sometimes they do. And let me tell you, education, the reproof, the rod and reproof is so important. When our oldest was even very, very small, my wife and I called this young teenage girl and asked her if she'd babysit. We had not had just a night to be alone as husband and wife without our children in quite some time, so we decided we've got to get out and just have a nice dinner together and get away from it all, just for a few hours, and then come right back to it, recharged and refreshed. When we came back, I think our babysitter had been on the phone the entire time with her boyfriend, because our youngest, or our oldest child, Daniel, had taken magic marker and had drawn on the hallway walls his own mural. And I brought him over to it, and I showed him how hard it was to rub off. And I thought, okay, he doesn't know yet what that does, and so I wanted to spank him right then, to be honest with you. When I saw it, I was so mad. You realize how much work this is going to be? That was not what I was thinking at the time. So I showed it to him, showed him how hard it is to rub off, took his own hand and said, you rub and see how hard it is to get that off of there. It won't come off. We're going to have to do this, that, and the other. So I said, if this ever happens again, now that you know, if this ever happens again, I would have to spank your bottom. What will happen if this happens again? Spank my bottom. Okay. Months went by. We said, you know what, we need to get out and just have a night together, and we called the same babysitter. Called the same babysitter. Came home, Michelangelo had struck again. I couldn't believe my eyes. The first time I thought, well, he doesn't know, let me educate him. But I'll tell him what will happen if this happens again. I brought him over, I showed him, I said, what did Daddy say would happen if this happened again? He said, he smacked my bottom. It tells me he knew. He knew what the consequence would be, but he rebelled and went ahead and did it anyway. My friends, spankings are a good dose of medicine for rebellion. In their younger years, they certainly reach an age when we have to keep in mind there are other methods of discipline, such as grounding and other things that can be done, but there's nothing wrong with that measured dose of discipline in their youth. And let me show you this in verse 17. Correct thy son, Proverbs 29:17, and he will give you rest. Yea, he shall give delight unto thy soul. Years ago, I stayed in a family's home during a gospel meeting. They had a small child. He was a very charming young man, but he was a little strong-headed, strong-willed. And so they would say, go to bed, and then he'd get right back up. Go to bed, he'd get right back up. This went on, and the mother would get up and down, up and down, up and down, and she'd just tuckering herself out. Every night I could see the exasperation growing, the frustration growing, and then one night she plopped down and said, I just wish I knew of a way to get him to go to bed and keep him there. I just wish I knew of a way. And this is one of those times when you're, should I or shouldn't I? Should I or shouldn't I? I don't want to make anybody mad, but I thought I could share with this young lady something that would change her life for the better. And also that child's life for the better. And so I said, I know of a way. Are you serious? Did you see it on 2020 or Dateline or some show like that? No. Well, what? Tell me about it. What is it? I said, now here's what you're going to have to do. And I said, you're not going to want to do this, but if you really want this to change, this is what you're going to have to do. It's going to have to be some consequence that you're really serious about enforcing. And just one suggestion here, you tell him that once you put him down for bed, that means you stay in bed. The only reason you get out of bed is if you're sick and you need mama to help you with you being sick, or There's something that you have to go to the bathroom, but you don't just get up to play. You don't get up to play. Once you're down in bed, you're down. It's night-night. It's time to go to bed. I said, you're going to have to do it more than once, I guarantee you. She said, okay, next night. She gave him this speech, and he was like, yeah, all right. I don't believe that. He got out of bed, and she gave him a little swat on the backside. You'd think that she'd taken the worst thing in the world and hit him on the backside with it, because he screamed as if he'd just been absolutely brutalized. He just hurt his feelings more than anything else, because this was not normal. What are you doing? And she put him back in bed. Here he came. She said, see, I told you. I said, remember I told you, you're going to have to do it more than once. This is an endurance contest. You've got to win. Now, the young man is growing up now. He doesn't know to this day that I was the one behind this. He actually likes me. I don't know if he still would if he knew I was the one behind this. But he acts like he likes me. My friends, she put him down. The next night, he got up once. She gave him a swat on the backside. He got up again. She gave him a swat. The next night, she gave him one swat. He went back down. He never came. The next night, she put him down and kept looking at the door jamb, waiting for him to come around the corner. And he never did. And she said out loud to her husband, I think he's dead. And her husband said, I don't think he is. No, he's, I said, go check. She went, she came back. He's asleep. He's fast asleep. She got on the phone. She called her sister in California. She said, you will never guess what I'm doing right now. Guess what I'm doing right now? What? Talking to you. Okay, we've talked many times, but I've never been able to talk to you without being distracted and having to stop and get up and interrupt. This is fantastic. I'm saying this, my friends, God knows what He's talking about. He does. Don't fall for this modern-day pop psychology that makes you think if you ever hurt your child's feelings, you're a child abuser. Don't fall for that. Don't fall for this idea that if you ever give your child a measured dose of discipline, that you're somehow a child abuser. You're not. As long as it's measured. Now, there are child abusers, and I'd be the first one to stand up against them and to them and tell them that they need to stop that. But I'm telling you, that's no more child abuse than giving a child a vaccination is child abuse. That makes a child cry too. Is that child abuse? No. Ironically, the person who would be accused of abuse in that case would be the one who didn't vaccinate their child and make them cry. And so I'm suggesting to you that the Board of Education applied to the seat of knowledge is still something that works even to this day. But you know, it's not enough to say it, you've got to show it. Educate, yes, but then demonstrate. We read in the papers, we hear on the air, killing and stealing and crime everywhere. We sigh and we say as we notice the trend, this young generation, where will it end? But can we be sure that it's their fault alone, that maybe most of it isn't really our own? Too much money to spend, too much idle time, too many movies of passion and crime, too many books not fit to be read, and too much of evil in what they hear said, too many children encouraged to roam by too many parents who won't stay home. Kids don't make the movies. Kids don't write the books. They don't write this book that paints this picture of gangsters and crooks. They don't make the liquor or run the bars. They don't pass the laws or make high-speed cars. Children, they don't make the drugs that addle the brain. That's all done by older folks, greedy for gain. And so in so many cases, it must be confessed, the label delinquent fits older folks best. We hear about juvenile delinquents, and there are some. I'm going to tell you why. In some cases, there are so many juvenile delinquents because there are older delinquents who are showing them how to be that way. And we certainly cannot act that way. When both parents are faithful, and I mean by that, they not only attend the church regularly, but they're participating actively in the work of the congregation, 93% of the kids remain faithful. Now let me pause and say a word here that I didn't used to say when I preached on this. When I was a young preacher without children, I was like this preacher I heard about that, just got out of college, he's brand new, married, and he doesn't have any children, but he gets up and He says, my sermon this morning, the 10 Commandments of Child Rearing. And even though he has no children, has no experience at raising children, he blasts the congregation for all the ways they're doing it wrong. And then he has children, and they get to the terrible twos. And they test his patience, and they're constantly battling to try to get supremacy, and he has to fight to keep it. And so he says, I'm going to preach this morning on 10 suggestions for child rearing. And then his children become teenagers. And he sees the battle and challenge that is there when you're raising teens. And he gets up to preach and says, my sermon this morning, 10 tips that just might work in child rearing. Now, don't get me wrong. This book isn't fuzzy about what we're supposed to do. But what I've learned to emphasize that I didn't used to emphasize is, children, are you hearing me? We've had many a sermon that have let your parents know what their job is in training and teaching you. And those sermons need to continue, just as we did in part tonight. But I'm going to tell you, there's a sender and there's a receiver. The child is to receive the message, according to Proverbs chapter 4, and retain that message, and walk in that way and not depart from that message. Let me ask you parents to consider something, because I've had some parents come up to me with tears in their eyes, and they're streaming sometimes down their cheeks. Brother Clark, I would never say that I was a perfect parent, but I really did try. I mean, really, I did. I was faithful in church attendance. I was not going around the house saying things that were wrong, showing things that were wrong. I was going to vacation Bible school with my children in tow, gospel meetings, sending them to Christian camp. We had the family devotional. I don't know where I went wrong. My child has gone astray. I must be a terrible parent. And hear me carefully, please, so that I'm not misquoted. Are there cases when parents do contribute to the delinquency of their children and to the apostasy of their children? Are there cases when parents are very much responsible? Yes. But here's what I'd like to ask you to consider. Did Adam and Eve have a father that taught them adequately? Yes or no? Why did Adam and Eve sin if they had such a good father and good teacher? Friend, some have this attitude that Proverbs 22:6 means once saved, always saved. And that once your child is saved, there's no way they can ever be lost. That is not true. God is the best father that one could ever have. He's the best. Is there one thing God should have told Adam and Eve, that if only He told them this, they wouldn't have sinned like they did? If only He spent more time with them, they wouldn't have let the devil do to them what the devil did to them. My friends, in this case, God was a perfect father, I am not. God was a perfect teacher, I am not. If a perfect father and perfect teacher can still have the devil going after his children, who do we think we are that he's not going to try to come after ours? So you're saying it's worthless to... No, I'm saying that, look, 93% of the kids remain faithful. Here's a statistic where both parents are attending regularly and they're participating regularly. Not even 100% of their children stay faithful. God, in the story, who's the father in the story of the prodigal son? We've always said this. Who does the father represent? That's God. God has some prodigal children, and they need to come back to Him. If you have a prodigal child tonight, don't give up. Pray. Don't give up. Plead, pray, and just hang in there, and hopefully this will change. If only one of the parents is faithful and active, 73%. And then watch this. In homes where only one of the parents attends and is only really mildly active in the work of the church, the number drops to 53% of the children that stay faithful after they get out of the house. And finally, this is most disturbing of all. In cases where both parents attend only now and then, and are not involved hardly at all, the percentage of their children who remain faithful plummeted to a woeful 6%. Demonstrate. And then next to last, and these last 2 points go rather quickly, participate. Participate. Someone said that a mom knows the exact moment her child was born, the day, the time, the weight, the length of the child, etc., etc. She knows who the child's school teachers are. She knows who the child's friends are. The father is vaguely aware that some short people are living in the house. I hope that's not true of me. I want to be a father that's connected. You know, Socrates once said, could I climb to the highest place in Athens, I'd lift my voice and proclaim, fellow citizens, why do you turn and scrape every stone to gather wealth and take so little care of your children to whom one day you must relinquish it all? And students who never eat dinner together with their families are 3 times less likely to have a happy and close home life than those who regularly eat dinner with their family. Take a moment to listen today to what your children are trying to say. Listen today, whatever you do, or they won't be there to listen to you. Listen to their problems, listen for their needs. Praise their smallest triumphs and praise their smallest deeds. Tolerate their chatter, amplify their laughter, find out what's the matter and find out what's they're after. But tell them that you love them every single night. And though you scold them, be sure you hold them and tell them everything's all right. Tomorrow's looking bright. Take a moment to listen today to what your children are trying to say. Listen today, whatever you do, and they will come back to listen to you. I had a dog once. I often sat down beside my dog and petted it, trained it, chased a stick, and took it with me hunting and fishing. I love that old dog. Had a car once. Oh, it was a good old car. Took care of it. Always made sure that car had the proper fuel and oil and other necessities. That car took me a lot of places. I love that old car. I had me a set of golf clubs once. Oh, we spent many happy hours together. Always took care of my golf clubs, cleaning, scrubbing them after every round. I love those old clubs. I had a child once. Very seldom did I sit down and talk and play with a child. I didn't see that he was fed the correct amount of spiritual food. After his daily rounds, I seldom asked him how his day went. I was too busy griping about mine. Did I love my child? Time passes by. My dog died. My car wore out. My golf clubs broke. That didn't bother me. They're replaceable. My child, I lost him too. And that can't be replaced. And so I just pray, hope, and plead for another prodigal son to return. And finally, not least important of all, supplicate. Educate, demonstrate, participate, and supplicate. Make your supplications known to God. This mother knows she's going to be a mother, and she says every night as she goes to bed to pray, God, dear God, please help me be a good mama. The couple finds out they're going to have a child. They're praying fervently for the child. The child is born. The child grows up hearing prayer uttered from the lips of his parents. Brother Robert R. Taylor Jr. tells a story about a soldier that went overseas. And he was ready to go out for a night on the town with his buddies. They had peer pressured him into it. At least he'd agreed to go, even though he knew what was coming was not good. And so he said, yes, I'll go. And he's on the way to head to the party where all this sin's going to take place. And he hears the bells ringing in town. And he does the math in his head, as he always did, quickly to say, what time is it back home? And what's going on back home? And it just so happened that when he did the math, he realized, back home, my mother, right now, I know my mother is at Wednesday night prayer meeting. I know it. And I know what she's praying. She's praying for me not to act this way. Not to be influenced to go off in this direction. The thought of a praying mother in this child's heart caused him to have the courage to say to his buddies, look, y'all go on, I'm going back to the barracks. And even though they ridiculed him and tried to change his mind, he wouldn't. My friends, I'm telling you tonight, That what we need is for all of us to do is to the best of our ability what Noah did, and that is to prepare a house for the saving of the souls of those in that house. Someday God is coming back, and I don't know when. But I want to be ready, and I want my children to be ready. I want yours to be ready too. Would you please, as we stand and sing the invitation song, think about whether you need to make any corrections. Maybe you need to become a Christian so your children can see they have a mom and a dad that are both Christians now. Hearing, believing, repenting, confessing, being baptized for the remission of sins. That's what the book of Acts teaches. It's what we've shown all week. Read the book of Acts and check me out on it. See if I'm not telling you the truth. Those are the steps. Do that tonight if you've not done it. If you're already a child of God but not acting like one, you're acting like a child of the devil again, and your children, you think they don't see that? They see it. They know it. Don't let them go to bed with the thought that my child, my father, my mother is not close to the God I love and the one they've told me to love. I want to know that we're all going to heaven together. And if you need to get right, I hope you won't delay one more second. I hope you'll march down one of these aisles and send your children a message that says, I will be in heaven, and I want you there with me too. As together we stand and sing.